Go ahead and call the USD 489 Board of Education meeting for Monday, April 29th to order. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Madam President, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda. On old business, we have subpoint B, the high school special systems renovation bids, and in that packet is a lot of information about facilities and capital outlay. I would like to be involved and still in here when Rusty talks about that, so I was hoping we could maybe make that a subpoint B, just facilities and capital outlay, and then change the high school special systems renovations bid to subpoint C, because that would be a conflict of interest as I was employed by Next Tech.
Does anybody have any opposition to that?
So I would officially make that motion.
Okay. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We are 6 tonight. Next is the audience participation. This is the one and only time tonight for audience to participate. Anyone? No takers? All right, moving on. We have communications from other organizations. First thing on the agenda is the Sunflower Bank ABC program check presentation. Oh, sorry. Oh, I skipped one. Sorry. I was just crossing things off. That's why I got mine. All right, we have Best of the Best. So this is, and I can't believe I skipped this. This is one of the best things, and this is why you guys, most of you are here in the room. I know you didn't come for the rest of the stuff. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with Best of the Best staff member. And this month we have Ted Foster from Hayes Middle School, and he was nominated by Eli Rohr. So if any of those guys want to come up and talk a little bit.
Okay. I nominated Mr. Foster for Best of the Best because he's just like an always encouraging teacher, and he's really there for you when you need him. He helps you try and get through things, because when I was debating on whether to go out for track or not, he always helped me get through that, and now track is one of my favorite sports. When you need just to sit there and talk to someone, he will be there. For most of the year, I've come in the mornings and come in after school and just talk, and most of the time we talk about the Flash on Wednesdays because it's just our thing. He really helps a bunch of his students and just really knows what kind of teaching they need and like how to get to them, and he really just doesn't he doesn't just teach everybody the same way. He takes a student and teaches them the way they need to be taught. He's overall just a really good teacher and doesn't put people aside. He just helps everybody that he needs to help, and takes the students that need to be helped more than others and just helps them more than the others need to be helped. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Ed, if you would you have to shake our hand.
Nice job.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, next, our Best of the Best nomination for our student is Savannah Klingon, and she was nominated by Leslie Carlin.
Savannah Klingon, a 5th grader at Wilson, is an outstanding student leader. As a member of our Wilson role models, she serves her fellow students and the school community. Some responsibilities that she has carried out in an exceptional manner are greeting students at the front door, monitoring the hallway, cleaning up playground equipment, and organizing the schools lost and found. In addition to serving others, she is kind, she is respectful, and she is very diligent in her schoolwork. She also helps her classmates by encouraging them to follow the rules and by helping students who may be struggling with an assignment. She continuously demonstrates concern for others, and she finds ways to make a difference. Savannah is an excellent choice for the district's Best of the Best award.
Good job. Very proud of you. Good job.
All right. So the Best of the Best awards are brought to us and sponsored by Tiger Burgers, Handyman for Hire, and Gellis. So thank you to those sponsors for letting us have this great award each month. Moving on now to communications from other organizations. The first thing we have on the agenda is the Sunflower Bank ABC program check presentation.
And we're very pleased to end up having Mr. Briney and Ms. Carleen here to end up honor us with a gift, I think.
Yes.
Thank
Just thanks for giving us a few minutes to come and meet with you guys this evening. As many of you, I think, may know, every spring, or well, winter really, January through March, we hold what we call as our ABC promotion. And so anybody who opens a new account during this period, they can designate what school or district they would like their donation to go to, our donation to go to. They designate which school district, and we then give $50 out of that account opening to the school, and then they and all of our other customers can designate additionally each 5 cents out of each debit card swipe to go to the school of their choice. And so then at the end of the 3-month period, we tally up all of that and make the donations to the different school districts. We've been doing this for 18 years and have given a little over $1.2 million to the school districts around our bank's footprint. And so it's something we really enjoy doing, and we know the funds are unencumbered. You can do with them as you please, and we know school districts can usually use money that they can use discretionarily. So anyway, we would like to submit to you today $3,369.85 that is designated by people in our market area to have donated to USD 489. So we were wondering if we couldn't maybe get a picture of somebody or all of you to stand as part of the presentation.
Go in front.
Whatever would work best for you. I appreciate that. I know it takes a little longer and everything, but.
It's always fun to take a picture with the chat.
It's not like I'm bringing you a bill. Get out here at least where everybody can see us, that's for sure. All right. Thanks so much. Really good.
Yeah, hand it over to you. That's right. That's right.
Thank you very much to Sunflower Bank and for supporting our schools. Next thing on communications from other organizations, the Early Childhood Connections Director's Report, the Early Child Connections Policy Council Minutes, and the Hayes Rec Commission April 24, 2019 agenda and minutes. Anybody have any questions on those? Seeing none, we will move on to the Laughlin Elementary School recognition.
We were very pleased at an earlier time to inform the board and others of this really honor that the O'Laughlin School had received. The National ESEA Distinguished School Award is one that's pretty, I think it was only 2 schools in the state that ended up receiving this. And so really quite an honor, but we were not able to end up having representation at any time come to the school board and actually be recognized. So if the O'Laughlin staff that's present could please stand, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. And there may be one individual who wants to have a few words, like Vicki, perhaps. Hi, Vicki.
Hide the back.
I know. Just need a few.
Actually, this was quite a surprise because we knew we had to receive this award, I believe it was 5 years ago. And so it was quite a surprise to go ahead and have us receive that again. What I've always told everybody is that really it's not anything that I have done in particular. It's the fact that we have a really exceptionally fine staff there that's really dedicated and does so much to make sure that each and every child has the best opportunities to go ahead and perform at their academically highest levels or even the social emotional levels. We did go ahead, I did have Gina Johnson and I went down to Topeka. We were invited down there to talk to that school board. And the one thing they had asked us is what was the advantage of having this. And quite frankly, I said, it makes us look to the future. Going down to the conference there in Kansas City, there was so much relevant information and so many fabulous speakers talking about the trauma and talking about the crisis or the problems that schools have nowadays. And so for us to go ahead and go down there and see all of those things, it makes us understand what we need to do to go ahead and look at the future and plan for how to best meet the needs of all the kids that are coming up, because we do have kind of a different student, different family that's coming into our schools here in Hayes. And so it was really nice to be able to look forward, and it would be nice if every school in Kansas had the opportunity to attend one of those conferences, because it really does make you focus and kind of have a vision of what is possible with our schools and with our kids. So I appreciate the opportunity that Kansas gave us. I appreciate the opportunity that you guys were willing to go ahead and send a lot of my staff members. I think it was really beneficial, and we have a lot of resources we're going to be bringing back and showing to our teachers, and hopefully share those with some of the other schools in Hayes. So we'll see how it goes in the coming year. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Laughlin, and then also congratulations to Lorgon for her recognition as Kansas Master Teacher. So I'll let John say a few words.
Again, it's kind of interesting that we get to recognize O'Laughlin, and then she ends up having her staff here because she's from O'Laughlin as well, and reading specialists there, that they're here to support her and recognize what a wonderful job she does for the school district and for O'Laughlin. Laura has done a fabulous job. I think it's very fitting that she is recognized again here at a board meeting and with her colleagues with her at this particular time. I did not talk to her earlier. If you did wish to end up saying anything, Laura, that's up to you.
I just want to say thank you for having me. I feel quite honored and blessed to be a part of this district. And thank you for the board for all you do for teachers and for kids. And Shanna and John for being amazing leaders. Shanna has provided great leadership opportunities in this district and been a dear friend. And John, I'm sad you're leaving. I wished you were staying, but we wish you all the best. And there are so many great teachers in this district. All of these ladies, any one of them could be standing here. And I wish they would get the opportunity to do this because it was quite an honor. So thank you for having me. Thanks for the recognition. All teachers deserve the appreciation and the recognition. So thank you very much. And thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
So before you guys all scoot out, I think Sarah wants some pictures with Laura and then also with the O'Loughlin folks. So go around front. Yes. Yeah. It's like a fun picture. I got my makeup case.
All faces forward, looking great. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Nice job.
All right. Next we have school spotlights.
There are a few to share. O'Loughlin Elementary student placed in the KDOT Aviation Art Contest. Want to end up recognizing fourth grade student Liam McLaughlin for earning third place in the KDOT 2019 International Aviation Art Contest. The theme was My Dream to Fly. There are 9 winners that were selected across the state of Kansas. Students in grades K-12 participated in this year's contest. Also end up having a Midwest Energy Award. Several grants were given to Hayes High School activities. Want to thank them for providing grants. Helping Hands received $1,000 to have electrical work completed at their work site. Had teacher Sue Ann Tebow and her students receive $500 grant to be used in conjunction with the Safe Relationships Week. Jessica Rowe was awarded a grant to purchase new vision screening protocols for USD 489, and Jarrett Fannin still received $50 contribution to project graduation. Also end up having the Hayes High production of Bright Star received numerous Chester nominations. Really proud of them. It ended up being nominations for Best Overall Production, Best Director for Alex Underwood, Best Leading Actress for Caitlin Leiker, Best Leading Actor for Cade Swain, Best Ensemble Chorus, Best Vocal Musical Direction, Best Stage Crew, and Best Design Guest. The Jester Award ceremony will be held on May 5th at the Century II Performing Arts Center's Convention Hall in Wichita. We had Jobs for American graduates. Kansas students placed at the state competition. I really want to congratulate them. This was a State Career Development Conference. It was on Wednesday, April 17th in Salina. We had sophomore Jonathan Roop placed 5th in math, and senior Kinsey Lindberger finished 5th in the poster competition. Junior Dawson Garrison placed 6th in the digital scrapbooking. And senior Lucas Mader and sophomore Zach Chance finished 5th in Students for Service. We had high school teacher named Hayes Post Teacher of the Month. Congratulations to Hayes High business teacher Shayna Pro for being honored as the Hayes Post Teacher of the Month. She's nominated by her daughter, Madison Pro, who's studying education at Fort Hays State University and works in the USD 489 after-school program. Educating USD 489 students has been a pro-family tradition, with Shayna's mother and grandmother also being teachers at USD 489. Shayna also serves as the HHS DECA sponsor. Over the past 21 years, she has led numerous students to state and national level competition. The Dane G. Hansen Foundation grants awarded the summer reading camp. They were very appreciative to the foundation for awarding $25,000 to pay for costs associated with the district's second consecutive summer reading camp. 120 students in grades K2 across the district will be able to participate in the camp this year due to the Dane G. Hansen Foundation's generosity. Students will attend camp on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays throughout the month of June from 9 to 11. Activities will include reading and writing in small groups and a field trip to the Hays Public Library. The 2018 summer reading camp yielded several positive results for students who attended. Of the 112 students who participated in camp last year, 39 students were able to maintain their reading levels from the spring to the fall testing dates. 40 students increased their reading level during that same period. Only 33 students performed at a lesser level than their spring test date in the fall.
Thank you. Next is the report of the superintendent.
I have 2 items to report. Excited about the 2 last Friday and this Monday. We were very busy. Shanna was very involved in activities and making arrangements for speakers, national level speakers coming in last Friday to talk to all the staff here at USD 489. And we were pleased to have Pete Hall come and one of his associates to talk about, there's 2 books that have been written. One's Fostering Resilient Learners, and that's about trauma-sensitive classroom. The newer one is Relationship, Responsibility, and Regulation, and that's trauma-invested practices. It definitely dealt with trauma, how to end up working with children, how to end up being prepared in providing for the needs of those particular children. It was very enlightening. I was able to attend the high school session during the morning and the elementary session in the afternoon. Essentially, it was the same information for both. It was just geared a little bit different for secondary versus the elementary. What I heard afterwards was very good things from the staff. It sounds like it was very much appreciated and really has purpose at this time, trying to prepare our teachers for those needs. And then I wanted to share that today we ended up having our visit, our OVT visit, and that's the second year that we're in it. We're looking for our accreditation process for KISA and trying to prepare going into the next 3 years of implementation and looking at the data, and we will have our actual visit in 3 years. But today we had visitors. There was 4 of them. Those four individuals came from Salina, Junction City, and Emporia, and they ended up providing. They gave us some different suggestions, ideas, but the main purpose was through the day we were giving information as far as what we have gathered at this point, what our goals are at the district level, and trying to end up tying into that. I was very impressed with the involvement. Even at lunchtime, we had members from community that showed up, and it was very nice to end up seeing the information that was shared in that regard. Mike was able to attend, so he ended up speaking for site council piece and board member as well. And I thought it went very smooth. I don't know, Shanna, is there anything else you would share?
I was just going to add, and I'll do it now since you brought it up, it really went well. They were very complimentary, of course, gave some good feedback because we want to grow and learn. One of the things they were most impressed, and I want to pass this on to you, is that we shared with them one of the 3 board goals is tied directly to KISA with some objectives, and they were very pleased with that and felt like that was a really positive thing in that the board's vision and what we're doing in the buildings is aligned. So thank you all for recognizing that and selecting that as one of your 3 goal areas and supporting that because that doesn't happen everywhere. So I wanted to pass that on to you. They were very complimentary of that. And thanks to everyone who helped make today happen. It went smoothly and it's over.
That's over.
Now there's the paperwork.
Yeah, that was it.
Anything else, Sean?
No, that should be all.
Moving on to the financial report.
Okay, I'm going to give you a monthly capital outlay update like we usually do, and then I'm also going to take a little larger look at our other funds. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to talk about 4 things this evening. First of all, I will share with you the routine capital outlay report. Then I'll talk about capital outlay as it pertains to cash balances. Next, I'll talk about our special funds cash balances, and then finally I'll share some thought on new money we will receive from the state. Okay, first of all, capital outlay for the month. Looking at maintenance and custodial, really minimal expenditures this month. We'll see a lot more come through as summer comes on and the big projects move up. But really, all we had was we had some control boards bought. They were about $1,100. Rebuilt a motor for $358. Some mag locks and control float assemblies. That was some more repair items, and then which was $2,400, and then some miscellaneous parts for doors and locks, which was $1,900. Technology, iPads were purchased for the middle school at $238,000, and there was not any activity with our transportation. Any question about the monthly report? Okay. All right, so let's talk about capital outlay as a fund. And I want to talk about just some general things first. First of all, remember capital outlay is used mostly for facilities. You can and we do pay for some maintenance and custodial salaries out of it, but it is mainly set up for building improvement. Cannot use it for teacher salaries, administrator salaries, anything like that. I'm going to talk about carryover, so let's define carryover. Carryover is the amount, and I don't have a handout for this, so you might get your pencils out. Carryover is the amount you have left to end the year. The idea is to break even from last year, unless there's specific planned or unplanned reason for it to drop. Carryover is used interchangeably with cash balance, which I'll also talk about in a minute. Okay, so capital outlay. You have authority to spend $5,397,097. That is what you have legal authority to spend based on what you published in August. On an internal budget, we budgeted $3,860,000, and that's a good strategy because that's put in our budget document so we don't exceed that amount because there's some built-in carryover there. So that means the carryover that was built in was $1.8 million, okay? And we're on target to hit that because you have a budget for that. This is according, like I say, back to the budget that you submitted and you guys approved in August, and then there were some things done on the backside with budgeting. Okay, what's important for you to note is that a year ago we carried over $2.7 million, and so we budgeted a $1.8 million carryover for this year. So you can see there's a significant difference there. The hope is we're caught up on some projects, and we have some projects that are ongoing that we don't have to pay for next year. My thought at the moment is that's really not the case. What we're paying for now is kind of a one-time purchases except for the leases we have, and we don't have any leases, major leases falling off either. So this means last year you ended the year with 2.7 million. This year will be about 1.8 million, so we have a $900,000 difference. So next year, we will generate around 2.5 million for the new year, and we'll add that to the 1.8. So we should, if everything goes as planned, we'll start out the year with 4.3 million. Last year was 5.3. So $1 million left. And so my thought about this as I read through it and check on it is that this was all planned. And so there really isn't anything unusual here, and I think it's also a kind of a sign of how we're using capital outlay and how heavily we're depending on it to maintain our buildings. So I might stop there if you have any questions about that. Yes?
I had two quick questions. You mentioned capital outlay being mainly for facilities and building improvements. Buses, is that considered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
good
wasn't
point.
sure.
That's a good point.
And
Absolutely.
that's a very common practice as well,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
And then we talked about carryover, and obviously the amount is different this year from last year. Is there a magic number that we're trying to shoot for every year? I mean, every year we're shooting for a 1.8, 2 million. Is there and I guess I say magic number, I mean, I'm looking at two things. One is comfort, but I mean, you've been also in education for years. You're familiar with all this. Is there a magic number that you're hoping for as well?
I'm going to give it to you right now that I think you want to carry over $2 million. Okay. I think that's the number you've been shooting for over the years, to be honest with you, from the conversations I've had. Guys that are involved with finance, it's always the more the better because you're more comfortable, you sleep better. But I would say 2 million would be a good number. It'd be a low number, okay?
Sure.
For a district this size, but it's probably a minimum number.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
How do you plan on getting there by 2022?
As far as the 2 million
Yeah, because
carryover?
it looks like we're heading down from 2.7 to 1.48.
I'm going to ask for some time on that, Greg, because when I met with technology, Russ, Scott, and Rusty, I was going to name the departments, but I'll just name them. I'm going to have to explore this more deeply, and we're going to have to look at some of the things we're doing next year. I just really got onto this piece of it and had a short conversation with Rusty just trying to check my numbers, but we may have to make some decisions. Now, the other thing, too, and I'm going to get to that, is we're going to get some new money, too. So we can talk about that, too.
Would that be the time to talk about maintenance salaries coming out of the capital outlay finally?
Yes, yeah, we'll hit that, Greg, here at the end of kind of what I'm presenting to you tonight. Okay? Okay. So now let's talk special funds. Special funds would be like special ed, and that's our local special ed budget, not the co-op budget. Vocational and textbooks, everything but general fund and supplemental, and the special funds I'm talking about are funds we can carry over money in, okay? First of all, I reported in February our cash balances were going to fall as we get closer to the end of the year and things become clearer. I still predict they'll fall, but not as significantly as I first talked to you about, which I'm glad about. So we'll talk about cash balances, and like I said, cash balances and carryover are used sometimes for interchangeably. Sometimes I talk about carryover by fund and cash balances at the end of the year. We have a trend, from what I can see, that our cash balances are slipping. Before I want to get into it, though, cash balance is something you use for financial stability. It's okay for them to fall. They don't have to be static every year, but the saying about cash balances, if they do fall, you have to have a plan to fix it because you don't want to do it over a number of years unless it's a plan. And then it's still okay. If you're planning something, it's different than that they're just, your costs are outrunning the money that you have coming in. So, like I said, if they're falling, you just need a plan to correct it. It's a simple concept, but sometimes not always easy to do. So let's look at some things. Just kind of what I see globally from the budget. A year ago, you were able to put $300,000 in contingency. I think that's great. That gives you close to $1 million in contingency. That's a great start. A district this size, in my opinion, should be carrying over about $2 million in contingency, somewhere around 1 month's salary and benefits is a rule of thumb. So you should be around $2 million. And when we look at our cash balances from a year ago, they've dropped some in food service. We carried over $11,000 in our special ed fund, not the co-op fund, the fund that we pay to the co-op. Our payment to the co-op is $1.6 million, and we carried over $11,000. My experience says if you can, you should carry over a year, if possible, and at least half a year. So you have half that made out. We didn't carry over anything in our vocational fund, and if you can carry over some of this money, take some pressure off the general fund and allows flexibility. It's kind of my rule of thumb that I like to carry over half of our expenditures in vocational, and this year we budgeted $639,000 in vocational. So we didn't carry anything over in professional development, which really isn't a deal breaker. Okay, when I talk about taking pressure off the general fund and supplemental general, one of the reasons is our textbook fund. We started the year with $418,000. We have $123,000 left. So textbooks, which is more accurately called resources for our teachers and our students, it's mission critical. So either in this budget year or next budget year, we have to replenish that fund so we can stay updated on our resources. Okay, and before I go on to the next topic, I want to mention sometimes spending cash balances down is a plan. You know, we made a decision, and I wasn't involved in that, but maybe there was a decision made that, you know, we're going to try to hold on to this thing and work a little bit, and we'll make it up this way. We're going to get an influx. We predict we're going to get an influx of kids, okay? And we do have some options here, so it's not all bad. I'm just kind of setting the tone here a little bit to talk about a few more things. So we have to figure out how to replenish all those funds, those special funds. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about something positive. All right? I don't see anything's dire here, but I think there's all things that we got to pay attention to, especially since this year we're fortunate that we should receive, if everything, T's get crossed, I's get dotted, we should receive $1.344 million in new money. Okay? So, okay, so it's a great opportunity to look at those funds and decide how you'd like to use the new money. As administrators, we'll show maybe the areas of greatest need in our opinion, but ultimately, as the board, you decide the priorities. And some of those priorities may include staffing, facilities, resources, programs. One thing about this new money, I'm waiting to see the real details on it, but there's some talk coming from the legislative end that they're wanting to tag more of that money to at-risk kids, the at-risk money. And we've all, I think about every district, big or small, has evolved to using that money for salaries. And we're seeing conversations in Topeka that they're wanting us to be more intentional about how we spend that money. So don't have all the details on that yet. We are discussing that as an administrative team to see how that fits into this new money. Let's see, what else do I need to add? Okay, so to close here, my focus is to give you a broad view of our finances, and also, well, probably most importantly, to start thinking about where you see the priorities on that, and like I said, administrative teams having conversations at this time. So, questions?
What Greg was asking had to do with the custodial.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, John. Okay, back to that. So this would be a time that you have let's call it $1.3 million. If in new money, you could pull those salaries out of capital outlay. You could use part of that at
91.
Thank you, 265 out of capital outlay. So you can make a decision on that at this time. There'll be a lot of needs. You know, we're still recovering from 2008, really, this district is. So there'll be a lot of needs. Thanks, John.
You mentioned, I think my numbers are right, your special funds shortfall of carryover was about 1.1 million, did I add that right? I think you said 1.6 was our budget, and you'd say carry half, and the other was 600 and some, and
If you wanted to look at that your budget could be down, that would be recommended amounts that you'd have in those. So yeah, you could total those up and say we need this much money to replenish those.
what do do you remember, or do you know what the carryover has been historically, or just
The
at least-
total carryover?
Yeah.
I should, Greg.
And was there more than those two? I don't know if I followed you right on that. I guess I don't want to misconstrue the numbers if I didn't.
And what I'd like to do is share with you our cash balances for the last 3 years. I can provide that for you, because it'll give it to you.
And that was kind of the other question too, on just the general fund cash balance. You said you wanted 2 and we added 3, but do you know what the number, the total is of what I'm trying to get at is if we should be at 2 and we're only at 8.
In capital outlay,
Yeah, or no, in general.
in the general fund, I am not following that question, Greg, because we don't carry over money in the general fund.
Well, or contingency reserve, I'm sorry.
Contingency
Yeah.
reserve, okay.
You said we should be at 2 million for.
Yes.
And I was just curious what we are at.
1.
Okay, so we're about half of that.
Yeah, in my opinion, you should be at 2 million.
Well, I think-
You know, that could be debated, but yeah, we're at 1 right
I
now.
think the auditors gave us that number several times over the years too.
Okay.
so.
Yeah, that's contingency, absolutely. This is just food for thought right now, and, you know, things are coming in more into focus as time goes on. Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Moving on to the consent agenda. Have the consent agenda, I'm not going to read it all, but it's on there, and so I'll take a motion to approve that. A couple things to note. We have some notable retirements. Sue Pallister has been a librarian at Lincoln Elementary, and she has 14 years of service, and she'll be retiring this year. Also, Terry Wilson, the outreach coordinator for ECC. She has 13 years of service and will be retiring as well. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Oborny. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to old business. First up is board policy revisions.
I wanted to point out two of the items that was discussed at the meeting, several meetings back, but it had to do with the tobacco products in school buildings. We were going, there was 2 options, one that we have used in the past and one that was being offered by KSB as option 2. And as we worked at that with the building principals, both middle school and high school were in favor of utilizing the new wording. So that was why that was presented as option 2 for both. If you can see that, it's in 2 different sections, one for students and one for staff. It's really the same wording for both of those. And then another was the question as far as what the wording should be, and that was on close to the very last one. It's CG, administrative personnel. There was questions on it, and that had the possibility of changing in the wording to be the district level administrators being the January date, and then the building level being February. It was really moving those a month up is how that ended up changing. And the third item that was talked about, which was a suggestion by board members on transportation, and really just kind of put those together as activities, the reading of it, tried to change it as little as we could and still make it really what, including them together, and that's stating the board authorizes the use of school buses and other school vehicles in transporting district students to summer activities. We also left in there the idea of the unauthorized use. We do want to keep that there of making sure that they have to have authorization in the use of those vehicles though. So, any questions about the other? I think those were 3 that were talked on.
Is the CG language in there?
CG, was it in there?
Is it in the packet?
Page 93 of the document I have in front of me.
No, there it is.
Yeah,
Didn't we talk about having there be some language on that, the board will review the evaluations and act on those in that meeting? Maybe that was just my imagination, but I don't. Which number was that? It's on page 92.
I remember that discussion.
What did you ask?
If we had, we discussed having language in there that we would review the evaluations in executive session and act on those contracts at that meeting, was what I thought we discussed.
Are you wanting to make a modification or add that in?
Well, I didn't if nobody else wanted it in there.
I like the idea of adding this to practice. I don't know if it needs to be a policy. However, on the flip side, if it's not a policy, is it going to be
It
followed?
won't be a practice.
Yeah.
If it's not in writing, it doesn't happen.
I could, yeah.
And then it, it changes as people change.
That is true.
That's just the administrative contracts, right?
Right,
Right.
right. District level.
It would be the building level and the administrative. So I think what we discussed.
The renewal of contracts for, oh, you want to add in language about the, thank you for making it bigger, by the way. I'm like, language about the evaluations, right?
Correct.
I think we did talk about that. Yeah, so I think we need to add that in.
So how
I
does
would-
that change the way we were doing things?
So we don't always see the evaluations
Okay.
on building level.
would we act on the rest of the policies, omit action on CG, and bring that back at the May meeting, the one item?
I'll make a motion to approve the changes except for CG and that be left out, with that to be brought back at the next meeting with language to address the evaluations to be reviewed prior to the action on the board meetings, or action on the contracts at the board meetings.
Second?
Been moved by Board Member Schwartz, second by Board Member Oborny. Is there any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. All right, so next on old business, Luca made a request to modify the agenda to have a facility or capital outlay discussion, facility needs capital outlay discussion prior to now item C, the Hayes High School Special Systems renovation bid. So as part of your packet, I think you kind of included some information. So I think Luke had some questions before he recused himself for the vote.
Understand. I actually thought of that myself when we were having the special systems talk. There was questions asked about the facilities, and I hope I've tried to put together some information that will help with that. Coming in here and trying to get across in just a few minutes sort of what I'm seeing over several years is difficult at best. Not just for me, but also for you guys, and I understand that. And this, the more I worked on this, the larger the explanation got that went with it, and it's just hard to put it into a small summary. What I tried to look at doing, my other background is in EMS. I've been doing it for quite a while, and as we triage patients, you use different colors and numbers and stuff to triage them, and it gives you a short bit of information that tells you a lot, and that's sort of what I try to do here. Some people have referred to it as a score sheet. I would call it a triage sheet. You could call it whichever way you want, but trying to use colors and just some numbering, grading to give you an overall look at the buildings. The first sheet, which that's the one that they just brought up, is basically taking all the buildings and all the areas that I'm looking at through capital outlay and trying to just break it down. And as you look at it going across the top, you'll see a grade, a building grade. And the building grade's basically just taking that building and trying to fit it into how it supports what we're trying to do in the district. And or how well it will adapt if we do a bond or do some kind of renovation that will help it adapt to what we're wanting to do in the district as far as our needs. The colors then, you see the key for that, green being the best, down to red. Basically the green, it's either just been replaced, it's a no immediate need. As we go down to yellow, it's in fair shape, potential for failure, and it's still supported. So we go down to orange, it's got a higher probability of failure, but it's still supported, and that would be like phone systems or intercom systems that are still going to be supported that may fail, but we can still get parts and stuff for them. Red basically is just what it indicates. It's probably in the worst shape. It's either already failed or it has a higher potential of failure, and it may not be supported. So as we go across on there, you're going to see 3 areas of red on there. One of them is the special systems that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. The other one's a roof replacement at Roosevelt. That roof I had been carrying, thinking that we might pass a bond or we may do something with the HVAC upgrade. It probably should have been replaced a year or 2 ago, but we kept trying to patch it and carry it. It's got to the point we can't do that anymore. We're going to have to do it whether we do anything as far as rooftop units or anything up there now. So that's how we got to that. That's why it's red. The other one that you're going to see is at Rockwell. It's really west side. It's in the tuck pointing. Same thing. We kept thinking we were going to leave the building or do something different with it. So we were letting it go, but it's got to the point that every rain, it's right in an area where there's a drain, and every rain we're getting water into the building. We're going to have to address it, and I've already got plans to do so. So there's 3 areas of the red. There's another sheet. It's actually the last one that sort of breaks that down, and I'm going to put it here so that I can do it. So we've got the 3 areas of red that I plan on addressing this year. And those are in, like I said, Roosevelt, the high school, and Rockwell West Side. Once those are completed this year, that will eliminate them until something gets to the point of that failure again. Yes.
Are you want me to pull a certain, we didn't rehearse this, sorry.
It's
Do you usually rehearse it?
this sheet,
You know,
right there at the top.
hey, maybe we did rehearse this. Sorry, I said that out loud.
So as you're looking at the overall sheet again that has all the buildings in each of the areas, there's 21 areas that are orange. And I'm going to try to address 5 of those 21 areas this year, and then 3 of those areas next year. That leaves 13 of them that we're basically just doing repairs on. We're not, and when I say address them, my intent when I address them is to replace them and get them to where they're no longer on the capital outlay list. So 13 of those items, basically, we're just repairing, and I either do not have the funds at this time, or it's larger funds that I'm going to be able to generate out of my budget to repair or to replace it. If we go down to the next one, would be the yellow area. There is 51 total there. I'm going to get to 2 of those this year, and then I'll be looking at 3 next year. That's going to leave 46 that we're basically just doing repairs to. I didn't put the green into this because it's sort of deceiving, because a lot of that's year to year, and you'll see yearly on there. in some places. It's our yearly maintenance. There's a certain amount of painting we do, there's a certain amount of HVAC, filter changes, all those kind of things that are going on there that we're funding part of that out of capital outlay. So it's more in line with what, as a maintenance or a buildings and grounds department, what we should be doing. We should actually be doing the upkeep and care and not the replacement and upgrade of the facilities. So that's what's going to be represented mostly in that green. Once we get something replaced, you're going to see that we're going to be taking over a higher percentage of the upkeep and maintenance on it and not so much the repair on it. There's two other sheets here, and they're broke out by building. And when you look at those, it basically takes the buildings, sort of ranks the different areas that I have there. I'm going to use the parking lots for, I guess, the example on this. Currently, we're doing parking lot replacement at the high school, and we've been doing it every year since I've been here. We're probably about 40% complete on that. Projected at the money that I've been able to put at it, and you're going to see that here, about $96,000 is what we've been putting at it, so roughly $100,000 a year at that since I've been here. We're about 40% complete. Completion date's going to be about 2028 for just that one building. So that means the next building is 9 years out before I can even start looking at replacing parking lot at that area.
Yeah, you're gonna have to start back on the first piece.
No, I'm figuring that it's gonna work sort of like a roof. There'll be enough life in it that we should sort of work ourselves accidentally into a rotation on it. So by the time we get out of the high school and I should back up on that, we will with the 3 or the 4 buildings that we've designated that are definitely the ones we're keeping outside of the bond. We should get in a rotation with those. The other buildings, it's going to be harder to get into that, and we're just doing upkeep and repair.
Does that take into account, Rusty, the Oak Park building?
Yes, it does. And Oak Park's actually listed in this. It's actually the one that I was looking at, and if you look at how I have them rated as far as replacement, Oak Park, there's some repair that we can do to it, and we can extend the life of it. It's got some cracking in it, but it would be the next one based on what I'm seeing that I would probably start looking at, and that's about 9 years out. And it's going to take roughly, let's see, three years to do it. That puts us at 2031. So then that's going to put me 12 years out to the middle school. That's the next one that I have in line. That puts me to 2034. And then 15 years out to get to Roosevelt and finishes it up at 2036 and so on. So you can get to see that it's quite a ways out. It really needs to be probably supported by something other than capital outlay. And as you go through and look at the buildings, going back to that first sheet, you can see where the most green and where we put a lot of our effort in are basically the high school, middle school, and Roosevelt, because they're, and made no secret of this, they're the ones that have been recognized in most of our projects, with Wilson and O'Laughlin being the next two that have been considered in it. I don't want anyone to read that we're not doing anything at those other buildings. We're doing repair, but we're not able to do any replacement. So what I'm reflecting in this is replacement, and anything else is just being repaired. So as you go to those other individual building sheets, you're going to see that RP/O, which just means repair only, and that's what we're doing. The other thing that I wanted to point out on this, I basically made this up from what the HTK study was, what we've done with DLR, what I've talked with administrators and stuff, but this doesn't reflect it reflects their input, but it doesn't reflect necessarily how they would grade the buildings or triage the buildings. This is solely me, based on Buildings and Grounds Director and my experience. So, questions on it? Have I thoroughly confused you with it?
No, actually,
That's great.
probably
Very helpful.
the best depiction you've, given at
I-
this point.
in doing that too, I know you had asked me to put together a list of how I would see things, and I really tried. I know one of the things you're wanting to do is get a list and get numbers and stuff. One, I don't have the numbers. I'd have to be going to the other studies to try to figure that out. And two, I just don't know how to list it, because the list would if I listed it out, I'd either have to list it as the priority based on money being no option, or I'd have to list it as the priority based on what I actually have, and I'm not sure how to reflect that. Because in my budget, I'm depicting it based off of my budget, what I feel like I can accomplish out of that, but it's going to take something besides that to actually fix the problem.
So the 3 projects that you have in red, what is the total estimated cost for those 3 projects?
I didn't bring those with me, just a second.
Did we already approve the bid for the roof on Roosevelt though?
No.
The Roosevelt roof bid is approved.
Okay.
So, and that's the one I don't, that's the one I don't have with me. It was 200 and, right at 200,000. The concrete, not the concrete, what was the other one?
Special systems.
Special systems
and
was 100.
tuck point and caulking.
Okay, the tuck pointing that I have, it's gonna be under 20,000. It's right at 12,000 to do what I need to do to get that fixed up. Now, that doesn't fix all the tuck pointing, that just takes care of the need at that point. And then the special systems,
It's like 125 is what you brought
yeah,
last time, right?
it's in his sheet.
But that wasn't the full completion of the project. That didn't include all the additional
That doesn't,
security and,
that just does the infrastructure, that doesn't do anything with the,
does anybody else have questions for Rusty on what he's presented to this point?
I don't have questions, but what you did with the chart A2 works really well with my mind. So I just want to thank you for laying it out like that with the colors and breaking it down and putting it in the order you did, really. I almost want to just print that out and have it with me at every meeting. Like, a tool like that is very beneficial to us as board members, and I feel like this has something I feel like I've been missing. So really, thank you so much.
I did include, and I didn't speak to it, I did include sort of my capital outlay spreadsheet that I have sent you over the years. And basically, it's just laid out where I'm at this year and sort of what I was projecting for the next years. I didn't know whether there's any questions on it while I'm up here too.
This is a great format to see things. Sometimes I worry you're a victim of your own success. I'm almost wondering if we shouldn't maybe have a yearly thing where you just kind of present and show us where we're at on some of this stuff. Because it is good to see. I mean, and it's hard sometimes, like I know we're looking at concrete here in a little bit, and it's like another 96,000 for concrete. But it's, when you look at it in context of, it's the big picture, and this is what we're put into this project every year, it just changes things.
I honestly, when I put this together, I was putting it together with the intent that it would be something that I was going to use yearly just to keep myself. I mean, subconsciously, I'm aware of it, and I know it's there, and I sort of have my plan laid out of where I'm headed, but this would actually put it on paper every year so that I, would have it and be able to present it to you.
Awesome. I do worry retirement's going to be pretty far off for you because it looks like your job's never done.
Yeah, there was some of that I was looking at that I was going to have to live to a ripe old age to see it done if something else didn't happen. I'm going to grab a bottle of water before we start the special systems, if you don't mind. Okay.
Does anybody else have anything for Rusty before Luke steps out?
Well, this might be obvious. On the capital outlay, the table you have, which you kind of held up, I think. The parking lot replacement, D, $17,000 is in red. Is that?
Excuse me, which one are you on?
It's the table, Excel table. It looks like the upper left-hand corner is capital outlay budget 2018.
Is it this sheet?
Nope, it's
The one I have projected.
I think it's the
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the budget.
Yeah, I stepped out to get a drink and lost where I was at.
So maybe it's just me, but are the red negatives or are they just highlighting?
The reds, where we're at on that, are actually overruns.
Okay.
Parking lot replacement, we done a little more that year, and that's out of this year. My balance is good. I'm not worried about the balance. And actually, when you look at your capital outlay report, you don't see them broke out. You know, I've got listed A through V here.
Right.
You do not see that on your report because all you're going to see is to the left-hand side of the sheet, there's a contracted upkeep of grounds, supplied upkeep of grounds, building and remodel. Those are actually what's in the capital outlay. I broke them into subcategories so that I could sort of keep track, and when I code, I actually put on the building number. So if it's a high school, it'd be 01 COL, and then if it's contracted like the concrete, it's going to be contracted building repairs 24. And then for parking lot replacement would be D. So I would put that on there, and that, when it goes in, when I go back to look, I can actually go back and see what I've actually put that into. It just allows me to budget better.
So those are, you're saying that the project went over what you had originally thought?
Well,
Your
the
budget
project
still-
itself didn't, because we spent $96,900 last year on that project. I had an area on the high school that was leaking on the back side, or running back in under the ag building that I replaced, and then I had a couple areas out front of the building that we fixed over spring break. And I knew I had enough budget to carry it, even though it ran that one piece over, to take care of those. It was a drainage issue. There was potholes and stuff on the entry coming in off of 13th Street. So even though you're seeing it at a negative number, my total capital outlay right now is $445,500 is what I still have in that budget. So, like I said, I'm using those for me just to basically project out how to budget for those different areas the next year. And you'll see it should come, yeah, it zeroes out.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay.
Any other questions on that? And then, not to confuse the parking lot, because we're getting ready to talk about that, and I'm 17 over on parking lots, and I'm just getting ready to ask you for another 96.6. That's out of next fiscal year, so.
Right.
Rusty, I have one question out of chart A1. It was the first at the very top of your work that you have there. I'm just curious, your determination when you created that, how did you determine between writing down bond or capital outlay?
Basically, I was going through and looking at sort of the HTK study as far as what it was going to take to fund it.
So it was the total amount of cost?
The total amount of
Okay.
cost, and whether I thought in a period of years, I've shuffled these enough, I got them out of order, and it's going to take me a second to find it. But here we go. Basically, looking at the total cost of the project per building, and then trying to determine whether it was even feasible to cut budget it out of capital outlay or not.
Thank you.
Does anyone have anything else for Rusty? All right, thank you for that, Rusty. We'll move on, and Luke's gonna step out for the Hayes High School Special System renovation bid.
Shanna, can you find me that one, because in my printing everything off,
Is that it?
I failed printing that one. There we go.
That's it.
So, going back to what we were visiting about earlier, just to sort of run back over it. Last fall, I brought in that the phone system at the high school basically had a failure, and it was one that we didn't feel like that if we tried to correct it, that we might lose the system and force us to do something, so we left it alone. In the fall, when I started this project, my intent was not to do it in-house. I mean, if I projected that intent or in any way, that was never my intent. My intent was to go out and hire an engineer, which we've done, to actually put the bid spec together and look at an overall need for the building as far as phone system, addressing our intercom system, and addressing the clock system as far as how we're, the time clock that we were using for the bells, also done like some of our HVAC, our lighting, different things, different systems in the building too. And and the clocks that we actually had in the rooms were part of that. The intent was to look at all those systems and look at the cabling for those systems and go out for bid to look at the cabling for the phone system, what we need to do to cable for the intercoms, replace the intercom system, and replace the clock system at the clocks that we have there. And basically lay the groundwork with the infrastructure for the phone system to replace it. I had never looked at doing that in-house. Now, to clarify one of the questions that was asked for me from the last meeting, it's not that we couldn't pull wire and stuff for the phone system ourselves. We had talked about the access points at the high school. Some of that was done by district staff. Some of that was existing wire. They did pull some wire in. Going back to the network at the actual network for the tech's not my big thing here, so I'm going to get some of the words wrong. But anyways, our network for the building, that was actually, a lot of that was installed in-house by maintenance staff, but it was done over a number of years. It wasn't something that they went in one summer and pulled the whole entire building, because if you remember when computers and networks started coming around in the districts, they weren't put in all at once. It was something that built, because a lot of labs were put in the district, and they'd pull to a lab and establish a lab, and then it would go out into another lab, and then we started adding rooms and stuff, and it built over a period of time, not just all at once. So with that in mind, my intent was to go in and look at hiring this project done and it's going to be the largest building with the most work to be done. And once that work was done, build off what they'd done as a department, and then look at our smaller buildings doing more in-house that way. So not only was it taking a large need and in one of our largest buildings, budgeting for it and getting the work done, but also using it as a model for us to go in and address, because our other buildings are not too far, much further behind the high school as far as the need for phone systems and updates in the intercom systems, along with the clock systems. So take that into account as we go and then take on those projects. The other piece that was asked of me at the last meeting was sort of the, as far as doing it this summer, we'd already, with me planning on this from the fall last year of it being a project that was hired, I never put it into my summer schedule as part of the work. We've already got our summer lined out as far as the buildings and ground staff, and I started to list that out, and then I got to thinking that I may be trying to throw too much information out at you, but this is our year to strip and re-wax the high school. And if you were here when we done that the first time, that's a large project. We're in our 5th year on that, so we'd be going back through and all the hard surfaces at the high school would be stripped and re-waxed. We've got the door project. If you approve the door locks here in the next couple meetings, there's about 435 locks that are going to need to be installed. And then in keeping the integrity of it, we're going to have to catalog all the keys, where they're going out, and keep that system. We're currently working on the moves and stuff with Oak Park. That would be part of it. And then Scott's going to be getting some more learning experience out there with the network side of that as we're going. And it's another one of those smaller projects that we can sort of do in-house. It's not going to be as large as what the high school is going to be. And then once the high school, we get that portion of it done, which we're basically allowing about 2.5 weeks to do the stripping in the major areas. The rest of the staff's going to have to move out back to the other buildings, because that's when we do our main cleaning and all of our restoration in those buildings. And that's going to give them between 2.5 and 3 weeks a building to try to get that done before school starts. So there's other things going on that would be involved in that the maintenance side is going to be doing, as far as going through all the HVAC while it's down and doing maintenance on it. So we've got a full year worked out. So it's never been in my schedule to do that, and it wouldn't be something that I could take on this year if we wanted to. Other questions?
I think that the one question I still had from last time is, what is the cost to finish this project in its entirety, and when is that budgeted for?
It would be budgeted for next year, and Scott sent a memo out that addresses that. And basically, there's hosted, district hosted, and then, it's hosted, and then that would be with no equipment owned by us, and you're looking at about $2,500 per month on that. And these are local. He went and reached out to both of the local vendors and then took an average of sort of where that was at. Then hosted by the district, you're looking at about $36,000 worth of cost for equipment. And then that's going to put us at about $1,900 a year, or a month, excuse me, for the lease on that. If we host our own PBX and we just stay with the current it'd be through Next Tech, but with the current phone service we have, you're going to be looking at about $1,000 a phone, and there's roughly 100 phones there, so you're looking at about $100,000 on that. And then you're looking at the current bill is about $1,900 a month, and you can see the cost listed out from there. I didn't catch, I apologize for that, when Scott sent me this memo, he didn't do the math on that $1,000 per phone, or at least give you an idea how many phones we were talking about with the 100 phones. And it's one of those that's in my mind. I saw it and read right through it and didn't realize it wasn't there for you, so I apologize on that. So your end cost, basically you can take the hosted and the ones you're going to be looking at about $150,000 a year or $150,000 for the next 5 years, and basically divide that back by your 5 years, and that's going to tell you about what we're looking at.
Scott, do you know, will you be getting quotes from others besides the 2 local companies as well, with all the voice over IP out there? I mean, I know we can do substantially cheaper than that.
Well, and we weren't bringing this in as a recommendation. We were just bringing it in as a budget figure. Yeah. She had asked for some kind of a budget figure. I believe it was you that asked for it. She'd asked for some kind of a budget figure, and we reached to the 2 local companies. It's not a firm quote by any means.
Did you figure out how many phone lines there are?
You said 100.
Scott,
100 phones.
100 phones.
at the high school, how many?
I think we're about 10, and we were planning
10
to get VIDs into that building.
And
Do
there
you
were
have, how many
100
phone lines
extensions.
are out there now?
How many phones total?
How phone lines?
I think we're running 10 right now. But when you figure main lines, counselor, principal,
And there's about 100 extensions.
There's not that many extensions now.
Oh, I thought
There's
they said
not-
100,
Not
I'm sorry.
even, not even close to 100. You know how many?
no,
Was that if you went in and put them everywhere that you were wanting to? Was that maybe? I thought somebody said 100 somewhere. We were
100's what we're looking at.
okay. Maybe what it
That's
was.
what we're expanding to.
That's what
Currently,
we're-
there's
okay.
not near that number out there.
I thought- okay.
Matter of fact, the high school's the only building that staff doesn't have access at every room with a phone.
So you're
It's
looking at
very-
with the new one going to
Yeah,
100. Okay.
it's very limited.
That's what I thought.
So the work that will be done this summer, though, that will fix the clocks, that will help then with the HVAC?
It's going to fix the clocks. The HVAC is tied into, so it's going to replace the clock system. So we're going to have the clock system replaced in every room in the building. So it upgrades that. It's going to separate out my HVAC from the old master clock system, and it will get us onto the DDC control that I'm using now. So it's partially on DDC and it's partially on the old clock. It'll get that separated out. It will upgrade the intercom and take care of all the intercom system, and then it will lay the infrastructure for the phone.
So the phone will be the only piece.
That would be the only piece that we'd be needing to do further work on.
Rusty,
Okay.
Yes.
cameras is also the concept.
Oh, excuse me, I did forget the cameras. It also lays the infrastructure for the cameras. Now, it will support some of the current cameras we have, but we were gonna use, yeah, the cameras would still be in that. And we've got that number. I didn't work on that and forgot it.
On the camera side, I think we were figuring roughly somewhere between that 80 to 120,000.
In addition to the phone?
Yeah, if you were to do a complete replacement of the camera system out there. Now, you could do, if you laid in the infrastructure, you could do a partial replacement to cover where there are gaps in the current system and continue to use the Pelco system as it fails out.
How many cameras are out there that you would be replacing?
Right now, I think they've got right under 40 cameras total in the building, and we would be putting in 51 cameras. And that was talking with the administration out there to see what is covered now, or are there spots, hallways where stuff happens that we don't have
Right.
coverage over.
How are you if you're 51 cameras, how are you getting to 120,000?
Depends on camera brands. Those were just going off of when this was all put out to bid, that alternate, each company submitted an alternate bid for a camera system, so we were just going off those.
And that would be in the budget for the next fiscal year as well? The cameras?
I don't know that all of them would be in the next fiscal year, because what we had talked about was continuing with the it's Pelco, right? Pelco system that's out there, and then we could look at either replacing half of them in a fiscal year, or depending on how my budget is, replacing all of them. So it may be a 2-year step to get the cameras replaced.
Does anybody else have questions for Rusty and Scott?
No. I mean, I guess I would like to say that I can't imagine, the cost of these cameras kind of blows me away.
$2,300 a camera plus.
But that's not what we're discussing right now, so I guess it would be good to look into alternative cameras, I said, thank you.
Well, the phones,
Maybe there's something special about them I don't know about.
the phones are equally disturbing.
Yes, I agree.
Mandy?
Something
On that
special?
bid, sorry, I misspoke. It was 67,000 was the lower end, so.
67
Yes,
instead of
okay.
80?
And I think 120 was the highest, sorry.
We're still
Okay.
above 100.
Now I see that here. 67 for one of them, and the couple others were like 122 and 132. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
anyone that would like to make a motion right now?
Yes.
Go ahead and make the motion to approve the Next Tech as low base bidder for the Hayes High School Special Systems renovation project.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Walker. Is there any further discussion or questions at this point? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, aye.
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 All opposed, nay. No nays. Motion passes 6-0. All right. So that's the end of old business. We need to get Luke, and I need a restroom break. So 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm not going to argue the restroom break.
to new business, and the first thing up is a high school parking lot replacement project bid. Rusty, I think you have like the next two on here. Before you go up there, I just want to say thank you for the charts as well. I really do think triage is the appropriate word for this. It disappoints me that we have a room full of empty chairs for these items that are costing so much money that, while they're for the safety of the students and a good environment for the students, they're not directly impacting their education. And so when people are quick to post on Hayes Post or Hayes Daily News about how we're spending money, it really frustrates me because they're not here to hear everything that we're listening to and how Rusty's trying to make things work. And, you know, when you drive through Hayes High's parking lot, it is terrible in places. I will tell you, it's awful. And to think that it's going to take 8+ years to get it back in shape it makes me very disappointed in this community. So, thank you for your time, Rusty, and tell us what else you'd like.
Okay, I think the next one is the concrete bid, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, it's the same thing we've been doing for the past years. Put it out for bid. I had 4 bidders that looked at it. 2 of them went ahead and submitted bids. Brian's Concrete so far has been the winning bidder out there. He's pretty much everything that you've seen in the parking lot since I've been here has been installed by him. The bid spec hasn't changed from the time that I've started. His bid was $96,600, and that's actually $300 less, $300 less than what he was last year. He was $96,900 last year. Commercial Builders was the other one that bid, and they're at $118,900. So I would recommend Brian's Concrete. The only thing that I would add to that is that it's out of next year's budget. So when you make the motion, if you make a motion to approve it, make it for next year's fiscal budget.
Okay.
I appreciate the timeliness of you bringing it that early as well, instead of some of these other ones we've had, you know, is like putting a fire out and we have to make the motion at the very last minute. So I do appreciate that.
And I was going to speak to that too, and I didn't in my capital outlay. There are some things that I do at the front of mine, and then you'll notice that, like in the HVAC, I've got carryover money on that. It's basically contingency money. I've got it there in case of a failure, and I usually try not to spend it toward the end of the year, and it's not necessarily going to be spent on HVAC. It may be spent on some on HVAC, but I also reappropriate that if I have funds left over into other areas to try to catch those needs. So you're going to see some of it at the front, you're going to see some of it at the end, just basically because I don't want to get my budget tied up.
Thank you for that explanation. You don't need action on this one or your next one
No,
tonight.
I'm getting ahead of myself. No, I do not.
Go ahead and knock yourself out on the next one then.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions? I mean, this is consistent with what Rusty's presented the past few years on this.
Fantastic. I just want to clarify that you did make a point that, did we clarify that some of the parking lot in Hayes High is terrible?
No, the parts that are done are really nice.
Yeah, the parts that we've replaced are really well.
Yeah.
I have to drive over by the track.
I know.
Well,
I didn't want Brian to feel bad.
I think that's a positive though, is it's a night and day difference.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it literally is a night and day difference, so.
Okay, the next one is door locks. Basically have started over the last 3 years looking at the lock systems in the building. And the lock systems that we had were never a district-wide system. There are different styles of locks, keyways of locks in the buildings, and even some of the buildings have different keyways and lock systems inside the building itself. Prior to me coming here, the systems are old enough that it became a practice of just cutting master keys for everybody that came in. So some of our buildings, everybody to actually work in the building has a master key to the building. If that key becomes lost, anybody who finds it now has access to the building. So one of the first things that we done was go out to the outside doors, and we have switched it to where there is no key access to the exterior of the buildings now. It's all proxy card. And the reason for that, it's a lot easier to shut it off and have control access with it. Key, you lose it, someone finds it, it's always going to be active. Somebody loses that proxy card, we go in and shut it off. If they find it, it's not going to do them any good. So we started at the outside of the building, and I spent the last couple of years basically getting the outside of every building secured to where there's no more keys coming into the building. We're just finishing some of that up. So then the next piece that we looked at was the interior locks and trying to get some control access in there. With the the key systems that we've had being around as long as they have, they're out of patent. They originally at one point was a patented keyway. You couldn't buy that key stock downtown and have copies made of it. They've came out of patent. So you can take any one of those keys and go downtown and they'll have a key blank for it and they'll be able to cut it. So if I give you a key to a building, you can go down and get a copy made and give it to all your friends. So that's the other reason for the proxy cards on the outside of the building. So I started looking at going to a district-wide key system and key access control. So we started putting that in place, and we've been looking on it, working on it as we move forward. In the process, we received a grant for
57.
Yeah, $57,773. It was a matching grant. So that's going to give us roughly somewhere around $115,000 to go toward a lock and key system. So I put together a bid spec and looked at Sargent 11 line series lock with a patented signature keyway. And the patented signature keyway is what I'd started working on in the district, and looked at a great grandmaster system to where we'd have a key that would be key that would give us access to the entire district, grandmaster keys that would give us access to different subgroups of buildings in the district, and then master keys for the individual buildings themselves down to the individual room keys. Been working with the administrators, and we've even went as far as taking and putting suites of rooms together. So I'm going to use the science rooms as an example. The high school science rooms, those teachers share rooms, they share equipment, they share the same storage for chemicals and supplies. So that suite would all be keyed to one room key so that everyone in that suite would have access to those rooms. Then the custodial staff would have a master key. The master key would operate the outside door of the room, but it wouldn't operate like the storage cabinet or closets and interior chemical rooms and that kind of thing. It would just get them in to clean the room, do that piece. Then the next level up would be the grandmaster key, and the grandmaster key would be at the administration level, and it would access everything in the building, including storage cabinets and stuff. So we put a lot of thought into laying it out so that we have an access control system that helps us control the areas that we want to control, but also doesn't have everybody carrying a key ring full of keys. So the science teachers, in order to get through 5 different rooms, don't have to have 5 different keys. So they've done the same thing for math. They've done the same thing for languages. We're looking at athletics in the same aspect. So we're putting all this together. I put the bid spec together for it, and the bid spec came back from Royal at $127,370. Now, roughly, and I didn't bring that paper up with me, roughly 17,000 of that, just to make sure that ECC at Oak, we call it Oak Part, I don't know, we've got another name for it yet, was also bid at the same time, and that money will be budgeted out of the funds that are for the ECC. So you can knock roughly 17,000 off of that. That's the locks that would go into the ECC. So what I'm actually bringing you, and the paper's standing behind me, I can get it, but it's around 110,000 that would actually be what I would be doing out of capital outlay in that grant.
Well, in 110,000, there's 57,000 that's really being pulled by grant money.
Right. So the buildings that are being looked at this time, there's 4 buildings with the grant and matching it. It would do all the high school, it will do all the middle school, it will do all of Roosevelt, and it will do the ECC out at Oak Park. And then it should allow me over the next 2 years to look at doing the elementaries, maybe either in 1 year or 2 years, depending on how I can budget for it. And I was going to point that out on that spreadsheet that I gave you, that when I was triaging the buildings, that if you looked at locks, it was one of them that I had in orange all the way across. And the reason it's prioritized that way, it's not because the locks aren't working. It's, you know, they still, now they're old and they probably need to be replaced at some time, but it's more because of the control. We've lost that control and it's more of a security issue then, and that's why I ranked it at the rating that I have it. Questions on that?
Is there a reason you specified sergeant locks on this?
I was looking at going to the Sergeant Keyway, and I went with a large diameter or a large bore removable core. And the reason I went with a removable core is if you do lose a building, you don't have to try to go through and key all of them. All you got to do is just replace the cores, and there's a control key that goes into that core. You turn it and it pulls it out. The other thing that I liked about those, especially like at the elementary level, they switch rooms quite a bit. So instead of having to go through and pull keys in, pull keys out, you just go remove the cores out of the 2 rooms that swapped and you put them back in, and you don't have to reissue keys or do anything, so it saves times that way. I was looking at the 11 line because it doesn't have through bolting. It's one of the more secure door locks. And it doesn't have the through bolting in it, so it's going to be a whole lot easier to install because we don't have to bore a bunch of extra holes, so it goes in and replaces what we currently have without having to go to a lot of extra work to do it. And we, you know, with that, we got 4 bids, and the 2 companies that, Royal Architectural Products out of Amarillo, and then Intermountain Lock is what the IML is, Intermountain Lock out of Denver. We do work with both of those, and they came in, they were pretty competitive on it. I mean, there was only a $952 difference between their bids, and the bids all came in. Topeka Foundries was a new one for me. I had done some business with Manhattan before, but we got some really good bids out of it.
And just another question, so anticipating a future bond issue at some point, we'll be able to reuse those locks and whatever?
The buildings that we're going into right now are currently buildings that will be part of that bond.
Right.
You're looking at extensions on them. As we go into like the elementaries, yes, all those locks would go into any 2 3/4 back set door, and that's what they're going to spec out for classrooms and stuff. So yeah, they would be capable of being reused.
Okay. And you said the other locks, the patent had expired. Do we have any concerns with patent on these going, or?
On the signature, and the reason I went with it, it's a patented keyway. It also has side pins, and you would have to go to a specialty place to even, right now they can't even get that key stock, and then once that key stock went out of patent, the pinning on the side is specifically to our district, so they would have to be able to get that pinning, and I don't think that's going to be a possibility.
Okay, so we'll have a good lifetime.
Yeah, it's got a good life expectancy. The other thing by going with the removable cores is right now, you're looking at, for those 4 buildings, you're looking at about $110,000 to do that. If, say, that patent went out and we started having problems to go in and just to replace the cores out, you're only looking at about $40,000. And you could actually go in, those cores are repinnable, so you could actually go in and replace enough to get a pull out, replace them, and then repin those and move them in and get a cycle going to where you could replace them in district. And we actually, in this process, we're looking at cutting our own keys. They'll actually be code cut so that they're cut to a standard. Some of the keys that we have right now are wore out to the point when they're taking them down and copy cutting them, the copies don't work because they're so far out of measurement that the mic on them that they won't lift the pins to the correct height. So once we get set up, we'll actually be cutting our own keys, and they'll all be cut by code so that they're at the right depth. And then we also will be set up to where we can pin, so you can pull that core out and repin it if you want to.
Okay, all right, thanks. This is going to seem like a silly question, but will they have the ability to lock themselves in the rooms?
Yeah, that was, and I should have, with it being a grant, I should have spoke to that. I should have even thought to speak to that. Currently, there's different functionalities of locks, and originally, when most schools were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, before crisis became such a concern, the most used function was a classroom function. And on a classroom function, you insert the key, you turn it clockwise, and it's going to lock the lock. If you want to unlock it, you turn it counterclockwise, and it's going to unlock the lock, and it's going to stay in whatever position you leave it when you pull the key out, whether you're leaving it locked or unlocked. If you're in a crisis and you're wanting to lock that door, you're going to have to go back out to the outside, stick a key in it, and you're going to have to turn it to whichever. The next functionality is an office lock, and they didn't put them on classrooms because the idea behind it was a student couldn't go in and press the lock and lock themselves in. That's not as big a concern now because now it's more the crisis side of it, being able to lock that door. So all the classroom doors to the hallway would be office functions so that they can be locked from the inside. They can also, with that office function, if you just push it in, the next time you operate the handle, it's going to unlock it. But if you push it in and give it a quarter of a turn, it's going to lock the button in place. So every time you open it, it becomes a storage lock. It's going to lock behind you until you turn the button back a quarter of a turn to get it to. The other function is what they call a storage lock. I mean, it remains locked all the time. The only way to get through the door is you have to insert the key and turn it and pull it open. That's what I'm looking at with talking to the administrators. That would be like on closets, storage areas, and that kind of thing where we want more control. So those will be storage locks. So if you just, I think the bid specs in there, if you look at it, they're going to be specified out by that functionality. There's some mortise locks and some rim locks that are in there, and basically they're just it's a mortise cylinder or a rim cylinder, and on a mortise cylinder, it's the locks, they're a heavier lock like what you see in a motel room that's cut in that has like the deadbolt function and everything. There's an actual mortise cylinder that slides in, it goes into that, and then there's a set screw that holds it in place, and that's the actual locking part of that lock. A rim cylinder is basically the same design, only there's a set of screws on the other side that pull the rim in, pull the cylinder in, and it's held by the rim of the cylinder and those screws. So you're going to see a few of those on there, and that's just some specific areas in the buildings that have that type of lock.
And then just to make sure I understand the breakdown, I mean, we're looking at roughly 127,000, but 17 of that is looking to go to the Early Childhood Connections building, the Oak Park. So that leaves us around 110, but we have a grant for about 57. So really out of our, I think we said capital outlay, is that where this is coming from?
Yes.
We'd be looking at roughly 53,000. That's kind of what we're going to look at.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's going to be, because if you look at my locks and stuff, it's showing about 46 in there, but that's another one of those that it's going to run over, but it's going to be picked up in some of that other money that I had budgeted for contingency on the HVAC. So it's in the budget, it's just maybe not in that specific line.
Wow. One more locks than I ever thought I would need to know. But thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
What I heard was another reason you can't retire, but.
Yeah.
All right, thank you,
No,
guys.
that's great.
Thank you, Rusty.
Thank you.
All right, next two items are administrative and classified handbook revisions. I'm assuming that's John?
Yeah, I'll speak on the administrative. Last year, we had several changes that were made. This year, I think the only changes that were really identified was on like page 29 and 30, and that had to do with fire drills, tornado drills, and emergency drill. And that was just correcting the numbers that have been changed for this next year. Other than that, the administrative handbook is the same.
Classified?
You can speak on classified, or, because classified really, we can have, Keith can add to it, but really classified's biggest job on it was taking pieces of our work with custodial and maintenance, the SEIU, because they had their own rules, and really, majority of it was we were able to walk away from, but there were some pieces of it that there was agreements that we have that within this. So if you look at the classified, you'll see the pieces that we have worked with them going into this next year, and it's just part of the, it would become part of the classified handbook. So I don't know if you have questions on that now, or if you were going to, because again, both of these would not be approved until the next meeting.
Don't a number of those fall under probably executive session discussions? You're talking pay and benefits.
Well, they are what exists right now.
I don't think you can now because you don't, it's not part of union negotiations.
Yeah.
So it would not be relating to specific employees whose personal information would need to be protected. Be more of a policy.
I was just looking at, I'll address a couple of them now just so they're out there so people can think about them, but the days off, if somebody got the maximum days off a year is 47, if my math's right, there's a lot of them. And now you have to be here for a period of time to get that, but that's I mean, there's 21.6, I believe, working days in a month. So you're over 2 months of time off, and you know, it just seems like some of them are repetitive. A business day for a court hearing you can go to, but you might have 22 days of vacation time. So it seems like a lot of those are, maybe everybody else has those, but those aren't common in most places. But and just some of the pay things, I was curious why we needed some of those special provisions, kind of the ones at the end there that dealt with, you know, if you were hired before X date or whatever the case was.
I might talk about that, Greg, a little bit. That you're talking about the end of the document.
Yes.
That was to clarify agreements that we understood that was made, to make sure it was clear on what was supposed to happen. Wasn't sure quite how to do that, to make it
Well, and
unambiguous and clear.
And I'm not trying to be critical of what you did, but I just, I mean, my understanding was one of the reasons we got out of the SEIU was we didn't have those negotiations in that contract, and therefore if we don't have a contract, then how is it that all the contract provisions now become policy? And I'm not, I think this is probably a question for Bill as much as the board and yourself, but I'm not trying to pick on you, but you know, there's the 1743 added to the wages to offset changes to overtime and double time rates, and you know, I understand why that was there. I just don't know, do we need that type of language instead of just saying your salary is X, and that's what it is.
Well, and I'd say that we did have several meetings with, and it wasn't negotiations with SEIU. It wasn't, because that's not what's needed going into this next year. But it was a matter that actually the majority of their working document was walked away from. There are pieces that was used to put in. These are not new benefits. These are benefits they had prior to. We were trying to work from the standpoint of, well, we were just trying to work with them in going into a, because we do know at this, and they also know at this point, there is no negotiations for them from this point on. And changes that occur for classified, there is always that possibility of those changes occurring just over time. But we were starting at this particular point probably as much for the peacefulness of the transition. That's probably the easiest answer for that.
But what issues do those create on other work groups?
Well, it does from the standpoint, but they've pre-existed because other classified has recognized that the custodial and maintenance has gotten a better deal. You know, they've had the negotiation process and they've gotten paid better, and they've had other benefits that did not exist for classified. I would say that in our conversations my conversation with Keith is that some of these items, not all of them, but some of them are items that we want to talk about as having some kind of a mesh with all classified having some of these benefits. Some of them maybe are beyond what's needed, but some of them are benefits that need to be talked about as a possibility for all classifieds.
Well, and that's where I was thinking. I mean, there might be some that we want everybody to have. There might be ones that we don't want everybody to have. There might be ones that everybody has that we want to change that just weren't SEIU specific. And it seems if we go in and add all of those, I mean, now would be the time to do it, I guess, would be the, I know that nobody wants to change, but it just seems like that would be the appropriate time to do it when we are making the transition instead of taking for a couple of years in a row or something.
You're right. Part of this ties to that wage study too.
Right.
The wage study of having that information, which we believe we'll have that in May, that information ties somewhat into this of us looking at that and saying how much money is going to be necessary over the next year, 2 years, 3 years to, if that's what we want to do, get our wages where they are competitive and should be for the classified. We have information that's I think really solid with certified. We have information that we can work from, and we know that that's solid information with certified in making comparison. But classified is what we're trying to work from at this point. The timing is part of a factor, but again, I'll go back to it was a matter of all the factors of coming together. I would say it was still my first answer of saying the peacefulness of going into the next year, knowing that there would be changes in the next year, 2 years. We know that's going to happen, but that's the reasoning for it. And this has been looked over by representatives, past representatives of custodial and maintenance. I can't say that they're happy with the things that we're taking away, because there are things that are not there that used to be. But overall, I think it's very safe to say it's very peaceful right now going into it. I do not feel we'll lose any of our staff of custodial and maintenance at this point because of this transition of doing away with the SEIU union at this point.
But there is a point that I think there is an equity issue of the other classified individuals, which does bother me by having a subset of a class within a general class of the document. So I think these are great concerns that are being raised.
Well, and it seems, to follow up on what you were saying, that if we're going to have that wage study, wouldn't it be better to do all of this at one time instead of piecemealing it? Because to me, some of those issues that of what's been taken away, you make up with a salary change or an hourly rate change, and then...
Well, one of the items that we are talking about is having a salary schedule, a wage schedule that exists. There are districts that have that. a wage schedule that identifies and accounts for years of experience as well as then categories such as administrative assistant, secretary, cook, having all of those identified in a particular scale that is identified, and try to work from that so that it would have a benefit over time. We believe that that's a monstrous job of changing if we wanted to go to that. But when you're talking about in fairness, certainly most school districts, I can't think of any school districts that don't, but it's best to say most school districts have what is a salary schedule for teachers. They do consider years experience, even though some people can argue to say, well, why is a 10-year teacher a better teacher than a 5-year teacher? Why do we pay them more? They're doing the same job. You can rationalize that with a custodian. A 10-year custodian, is that a better custodian than a 5-year custodian? But as far as paying them for their experience and their loyalty, I guess, to your organization, that's being considered. Problem with that is we believe that it could be sizable, $100,000, $200,000 to try to end up making that conversion, which would necessitate probably 2-3 years to end up really getting it completely changed over. This is tied to a budget that does exist now. We're used to this. This is not going to add more money to what we've been paying because the custodial staff has been receiving this. I understand you're saying as far as fairness, but if fairness was really put into this new schedule that I'm speaking of, I think I would guarantee that the custodial and the maintenance would be identified as getting paid more than many of the other areas. So that's just what will happen as far as the number of dollars.
That's a positional type thing, just like saying, it's
right.
If you're comparing a teacher to a
paraprofessional
classified staff or something,
yeah.
So I think there's some clear lines you can delineate there, but fairness is just a tough word for me because it's always in the eyes of the beholder, and so what we think might be fair, one or a bunch don't, and so you want to be aware of it, but for instance, we talked, I don't know if it was several years ago, about switching to a PTO policy instead of all these different leave times, and one of the benefits I thought we had with this was to take a look at and make such a switch, and I know it's more difficult. I know that that's going to be more time consuming and be a bigger shock, but if you do that over, one of the questions is it better to do 3 years of changes or to do 1 year of change and move on? I don't know what the right answer to that is, but it seems if you get it done and move on, it allows people to adapt instead of a constant state of change. But
right.
But I think the pay part and all of this together would make it a lot easier to evaluate those. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions, concerns? If not, I would suggest that you read through the.
Can I ask for one clarification for everybody? Because I spoke my piece about waiting for the other. Does anybody else think we should wait, or do we want to move forward with this?
What I was going to say is I think everybody needs to spend some time reviewing this and take into what you just said into consideration before the next meeting, is what I was going to say. I personally have not had time to review this extensively.
Mandy?
Yes.
I might mention, and John can clarify this, my understanding about what we have in this document was what was agreed to when we merged this together. So my impression is, and I'm new, so you guys can, maybe John can help me too, is that if we don't go with these, there could be some folks offended because they think there's a handshake deal on what's in this particular document.
Is that accurate, Bill, or is that?
I'm not sure I understand what he's
I'm not
talking
aware of
about.
any deal, or that was.
Because I haven't been involved in any of these.
No, I'd say when we completed, when we had our last SEIU meeting, And in that meeting, it was identified that we would meet, we being Rusty, myself, we would end up meeting and working with custodians and maintenance and trying to work out, it wasn't negotiations, but end up working an agreeable, solutions to what they've been working from, and then the classified. We knew that'd be the biggest problem. We also knew if you just took them and threw them into the classified handbook, it wouldn't work that way either. There'd have to be some changes that are made. So this is the result of probably, I think, 4 different meetings of trying to get to that particular point. But again, as we talked, we knew that there was going to be more changes. It's just a matter of working from this going into the next year and trying. I agree with what Greg's saying. I would love to be able to grab a Band-Aid and just yank it off instead of trying to, over 3 years or how much time. I would love to look at that $200 and some thousand that exists in salaries that go to custodians or maintenance to make that switch immediately. And maybe we will. But it also is a matter that if you have a plan, and at this particular time, when I say plan, the state is identifying 5 years of known budget. Whether or not that's true, if over time it happens, they are identifying 5 years of known budget. Now is a time that you could work from that and identify 2 years, 3 years, and plan some of those monies for a reason to get to a point, whether it's contingency, whether it ends up being tied to a stabilization of what your carryover is, whether it ends up being the capital outlay that we just were speaking of. But this was done more from a policy standpoint and trying to work with that group of people than actually a budgetary at that point, if you follow what I'm saying. This was work from, in that regard, and making that transition. That was the intent. So I too would agree, looking it over, contacting myself, contacting Rusty. I think it's nice that we have 3 weeks until the next board meeting to end up considering this and for the next board meeting.
So if you have questions in advance, get them sent in earlier than. Okay. Anything else on that topic? Okay. Shanna, you're up with a curriculum update.
One thing I wanted to note that hadn't been mentioned, because there are 2 things on my list. We have 15 teachers, roughly 15, that we are that are willing to come to some study sessions that we provided, and then they will take the ESOL praxis test in the hopes that they receive a passing score and can add the ESOL endorsement to their license by September 20th. Because the students then that they work with, we will generate additional bilingual funding at the state level. So we did this a few years ago. We appreciated the teachers that were willing to work on that and have that added. Many of those teachers have retired, and so it was time to look at that again. So I just want to let you know that we are trying to maximize funding, see what we can do to help our cause in any way we can. So that is worth noting. As far as information, we're throwing a lot of numbers and budgetary things out there. It's taken a while. This graph may look familiar to some of you if you've been on here a while. So this is basically just kind of the history of some purchasing that we've done with the textbook instructional material orders. The last ones we did were Go Math and our elementary math, and then our ELA at the elementary and middle school. So you can see the notes. This has been put together just by contracts we found, POs, because the paper trail has been difficult to follow. But there were some projected expirations. If we look at what is highlighted in yellow, we'll be looking at just a sociology, some materials at the high school, and then our math at the middle school is on a little different cycle than our high school math and the other social studies. You can see in June 2013, all of these were purchased with no fund tax warrants, which we no longer are practicing. So since I came to the district office years ago, we've been trying to build up, as Keith was talking about, balances, a sizable, healthy balance for textbook instructional materials. We aren't there yet. So what we're looking at for upcoming is this year 6-8 math renewal, sociology at Hayes High. But next year, we will be looking at K-12 social science, high school math, even our high school ELA. So what most likely will happen is we'll at least renew our online subscriptions because our teachers use that a lot. We won't be purchasing new textbooks. We don't have the fund to do that. But as we look at receiving additional dollars and funding from the state, we really cut to zero the textbook instructional material. I mean, there's nothing that we have set aside general fund, and so we need to replenish that. How it's built up now over the past couple of years is when we have the enrollment material fee that we charge families enrollment time, that is funneled to principal budgets to each building, and then what's left is going to this textbook fund. But we need to be more intentional about that. And if we haven't reduced those principal budgets, and that's not what I'm proposing, but we do need to look at committing additional dollars so that we have a healthy balance in that textbook instruction material fund. So I feel like that will be a process when it is decided at the state level as to what dollars teachers will be given. Whoa. We've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about moving capital salaries out of capital outlay. We've talked about adding to the textbook material fund. So there are some things that we will want to, and it may be done over, years. It can't all be done at once, but we need to be intentional about how much we want to be setting aside over time for what we know we have cut to zero to get some healthy balances, because in order to be in good standing, that's going to be important. The other part of that is our at-risk funding that we've been given, that we earn at the state level, our at-risk funds. We have heard a lot this past year with federal dollars and state at-risk funds that there will be more accountability. You heard that with the legislatures, more accountability with how they're spent. And right now, Fund 13 is our at-risk fund, and a allowable practice for spending at-risk dollars has been to take the amount of salaries of your teachers from at-risk that serve those at-risk students. So if you have 30% of your students at risk at a building, 30% of those teachers' salaries can be spent with at-risk funds. But when you look at the research, best practice, that doesn't help us improve test scores for those at-risk kids. That's just a way that we've been allowed to spend those funds. But as we want to move the needle and really help those at-risk students achieve, we need to be looking at spending at-risk dollars on different programs, interventionists, other support staff that can work with those students. So that needs to be part of our conversation when we look at new dollars as well. And I do believe we'll be getting some directive from the state on that as well, because the accountability for at-risk dollars and some of those things at the state level are coming with any new funding that is decided upon. And actually, when I talked about the evidence-based best practice, I thought that link was live. It was at one point. Okay. Well, there is a site at KSDE, and if you can just Google evidence-based best practices, that really talks about and helps you look at. One of them is a What Works Clearinghouse, and it lists literacy, math, different programs, and what their effectiveness rate is. It was good to see that Reading Recovery, which is how we spend some federal dollars, our title dollars, Level Literacy, which is the program our Title I teachers use with our kids in reading. They are strong with some research-based. One of them that we're talking about, and we talked about not renewing, is Accelerated Reader. That has mixed reviews, and there's not a lot of evidence of growth with that. That was really, the program is about kids reading books and at their level. The reading workshop has really embraced a lot of that, and we've done some celebrations at buildings with reading workshop. Teachers still like the Accelerated Reader for some accountability pieces, and their use of it is appropriate. We just have to weigh whether it's worth spending the dollars, and if there's something that has more evidence-based best practice, then we need to be spending those dollars in that regard. So decisions we made on renewals and that type of thing will be based on that evidence-based best practice, because it's what we should be doing and what we will have to do with the federal and what it sounds like some at-risk funds. So the takeaways from what I'm sharing with you is we will be doing some renewals this year. The reason we have such a large renewal in so many areas coming up is because if you remember when we did the no tax fund warrant, we had a sizable amount and we spent it, and so that's the rotation we're on. And so we don't want to, buy early and then double buy for a year or purchase. So we don't have anywhere near the amount of money to look at adopting a new resource, a new material, but we at least can do some renewals of our online subscriptions and or have our departments and grade levels talk about any other supplemental. So again, we want to build up that balance and then also make sure we're looking at evidence-based best practice when we are selecting materials. Any questions about that?
I just have one, and maybe it's a point of clarification, and I really hate asking questions after the meeting's already been 2 hours. But so the reading workshop that has been implemented, we're on our second or third year now? Finishing up second year.
Yeah, we had a pilot year, so.
Is this Reading Recovery or is this something else?
No, that's she's talking about our ELA core, the reading.
Yeah, so that's the core curriculum for the reading part. So I've been hearing buzz that in some of the classrooms that new books are needed or more books are needed or et cetera, et cetera. And so when we talk about being intentional with our dollars, that is one thing that I think we really need to be looking at, is that if we're only 2 years in and we're needing new books or more books or other books, budgeting for that need and not having to necessarily ask for, the foundation or PTA or whoever to buy more books for that reason, because it's something that we've chosen as a curriculum item and methodology, and it sounds like it's doing well, but I would like to see us be prepared to support that.
And build it into the budget. And we
Right.
just talked about that with our ELA support side. And what's nice about the ELA curriculum now, they're not textbooks or online subscriptions. The books really are building more of those. So it's not something that will run out in 6 years and we'll have to renew, other than continuing to provide some books at different grade levels with different needs. So we do need to build into just the working budget, and I do have a textbook line that just kind of replaces things that have been worn out, but be more intentional about building into that budget, maybe so much every year for certain grade levels and have that on a rotation. So yes, those are the types of things we have to be intentional about and be setting dollars aside for. So thank you for bringing that up. That is something we've discussed as well. Any other questions or thoughts for me?
Okay. Next.
Thank you.
2019-2020 student fees.
The student fees, still trying to consider greatly the request of the board a couple of years ago that our fees are too high in Hayes, and we really started with that $135 workbook material fee and cutting that $45 off a couple of years ago, making it $90. $90 still seems high for families when they're enrolling, of course, but the identification we looked at for this year was focusing on high school with that tech fee and making it the same as the middle school, reducing it $25, making it $25, just as the middle schools is. They both end up, at this time, have access to the machines to take them home. The fee is there really for that part of taking care of the machines, and that's what we were focusing on this time. Talking to Jessica, every year it's subject to some possibility of the fees going up for breakfast and lunch, but she said that really she would be fine this year, full well knowing that the following year it's probably likely that we would see a increase with food, with breakfast or lunch every other year. It doesn't mean it have to be very much. It could be the following year just a dime or a nickel, but still there'd probably be some increase every other year. But this year, the same as last. So that's what's being proposed at this time.
What would be, other than, I mean, I know we're trying to do the fees, but why would we drop the high school technology fee when we have more money in those devices and that anyway?
Well, the high school, because of some of the things that were put in play as far as them being able with the Dells to be able to work on them, to fix them, they believe that really the $50 is had purpose maybe a few years ago when that was first put in play, but at this point that's more than what the intent was for the parents or for the families to put that money in. And the same thing goes, you can make the same case when you're talking about workbook and material fee. It's a little bit tied to that textbook item. When you had it at $135 per family, that $45 extra made a big difference as far as helping out and that funneling to that textbook fund. The thing that hasn't happened since we changed that a couple years ago is then increasing on a yearly basis how much money is coming out of the general fund and being funneled to that to take its place. We've identified that there are places that it has worked. We've made it work, but it's odd when you end up having, and I'm slipping onto another road a little bit, but even the parent organizations that end up helping the elementaries, the amount of money that they end up making is just tremendous. And they do that to end up buying different pieces of equipment. That's very generous. We're very, very, very fortunate to have that. We have booster clubs that make enough money that they buy not just the polo, they buy the jerseys. I mean, there are things that in other districts you question, why is that? Jersey that's a necessity. You've got to have that. That should be coming out of general fund. So those are things that we've been talking about of trying to change that, where although it's worked, there's question as far as how much money is being taken out of the pockets of the families, and whether or not we should be rededicating our general fund and redoing our capital outlay so it takes care of a number of those items. So.
Does anyone have any questions about the fees right now? Next item is the Kansas Association of School Board renewal.
It's the time of year to identify the use of KSB, and in our particular case, I would say we take full advantage of their services. I would recommend that the board consider that to vote for it at the next board meeting.
Can we, and I don't want to elongate the meeting much, but the season pass, can we at least see if that's cost effective or has been?
I can bring to you actually information, because we've looked at that, and actually we thought of doing that last year or the year before. We didn't last year. We did not feel that we had enough board members that went to different sessions to make it worthwhile. But the cost of some of the sessions and perhaps the use of it this next year, maybe. So yes, I can have that for the board for the next board meeting as far as what the sessions can cost and if that $1,500 extra has merit or not.
Well, just really how many we've had, how many we've signed up for last year, or last
Right.
couple of years.
I can sure do that.
And that would account for you guys as well, right?
It does.
It does, yeah.
So,
And I guess the other is to project out. Would that cover the cost of new board member orientation? Just something to look at, that, because,
I don't know.
No, it
I'd
doesn't.
have to ask him, I don't know.
Sarah says no.
I'm not.
If it's part of them. It
That
does
one's
not,
covered.
okay.
Okay. I would be kind of interested.
That'd be another question I need to find out is what does it cover? They have many sessions through the year, and I just didn't know if that one, which is viewed as maybe they categorize it a bit different.
Are you talking about the whole board training where they come to you,
No,
or just where you go to?
just like the ones that go to
location?
their sessions.
Excuse me, those are covered.
Those are
Okay.
covered. That's potential.
Well,
Okay, well, that would be
yeah.
I guess
potential
if you
real
get a
cost.
list, John, or see a list of kind of what is covered under season pass, maybe send that out in an email to us.
Certainly. Yeah.
Anything else? Chris, you're up.
All right. Shouldn't have more than another couple hours for us. I've only got 4 quick things that I wanted to talk through, kind of give you an update as we're getting closer to the end of this fiscal year. A little bit earlier, during the consent agenda, you approved the 6B assurances. 6B is our federal funds for special education, and really what you're approving is that we follow accounting practices and all of the rules and report back to the state and meet all of their requirements. The good news is our federal money, if you remember back from a few months ago, we talked about the fact that the feds, when we passed IDEA, special education law, they said we would fund up to 40%. They have historically funded about 12%. But there is more conversation at the federal level again to say maybe we ought to relook at that and consider funding more. There's no action to it, but as long as they're having the conversation, at least it's on the radar that they, at the federal level, significantly funded less than what has been talked about, recognize that they need to. Second thing I want to talk to you about is at the local level. So Keith, as he was reviewing your budget, he talked a little bit about your Fund 30, or the fund that you use to pay the district assessment and flow through money to the special ed co-op, which is in your budget, but it's a whole separate fund. 78 is all of our co-op stuff. Okay? So in your Fund 30, you have to have enough authority. So when you approve the budget, that means, okay, we have the legal authority to spend this much money. There's really 3 things that you have to have, or that you spend money out of your Fund 30 or the district special ed fund. One of them is your special education transportation, because each one of the member districts does their own transportation. And that's about $150 a year is what you do. The second thing is your district assessment. So that's what the district, that's what 489 pays to be a part of the co-op. Sounds weird since you host the co-op, but you have a district assessment that goes into our SPED funding pot. And that is about 1.6 million. That number hasn't changed over the last 5 years, and there was enough budgeted in there, so we're good there. The third piece is the state aid. So the state, if you remember, we get funded based on the number of teachers that we have. We send in our categorical aid, our personnel reports, and we get our categorical aid. Well, that doesn't come directly to the co-op. That goes to each one of the member districts. So all 4 of the districts get that flow through, and then once they receive it, then they have to turn around and pay us. So you have to have enough authority in your Fund 30 to forward that to me. And that's where we run into a bit of an issue, because we've got about $4.36 million worth of authority in your Fund 30 right now. Like we said, transportation and district assessments are okay, but the 2.2 that was estimated last May is well under what categorical aid, what we'll receive in flow-through money. So it's kind of a good problem to have. Not really more than what we planned on, but definitely more than what was budgeted for, what was reported to the district to budget for. So you've got about 437 in authority, and next month I'll have a sharper number for you, but we're going to be recommending that you republish your budget to give about 4.6-ish million. Now when you publish your budget, it means you can go up to that much. There's nothing wrong with underspending that, but you can't go over. So I'll know a little bit more. We'll have our final personnel report but it's going to be somewhere around 4.5, 4.6 that they'll have to republish to be able to flow through that money to the sped co-op. Questions or concerns on that? That flows nicely into, I'm starting the round, so you get kind of the first run at it, and I'll be heading to the other districts over the course of the next month, but talking about plans for where we're wrapping up FY19 and plans for fiscal year 20. And I've got in your handouts the last several years of cash carryover. So just like Keith talked about, in our Fund 78, the co-op money, we carry over money. Target, in my opinion, we spend about $600,000 a month out of the special education fund, and so target should be really around 2 months worth of carryover. So around 1.2 million in carryover, that is based on when we receive state aid payments and things like that. So we have to remain solvent. So we need to carry over some money based on when we get paid and when district assessments come in, things like that. We're carrying over, if you can see, over the last 5 years, we're averaging about 1.2. We had gotten as high as 1.9, and I think that was by design because we knew that there were some things that needed to happen with para pay and things like that. So they did some things to increase carryover. Now we put in practice last year coming into this year that $2 an hour raise to paras, right? So we knew that was going to increase cost. And the superintendents, the council of superintendents, basically said, okay, we've got enough in carryover, let's put it in play and then see what happens. Well, here's what's happened. Our carryover, we're going to be somewhere between 1.46 and I'm going to say 1.6. Probably the lowest, worst case scenario is probably about 1.46 in carryover, which that's still above where we ultimately need to be. But if you look at from 18 to this year, you can see that number almost doubled. That's what happens. Once you start cutting into your carryover, now you're budgeting part of that carryover. So next year, the decline is going to almost double. So what we need to do is, like I think Keith said it pretty well, it's okay to go down. We were planning on that, but we have to have a plan. We have to have a target of where we want to be. And so state aid is going to stay about flat next year for special education. Federal aid is going to stay about flat unless big supply. And so we need to control the one thing that we can't control is our district assessments. And so I'm going to be coming to you probably next month, and as I make the rounds to the other districts, letting them know too. I'm going to be recommending probably in the neighborhood of a 5% increase, or up to, I won't go over that, but up to about a 5% increase. A couple of reasons. One, we haven't raised district assessments in 5 years. Two, we're on this trend right now of carryover going down, and we don't have to stop it, right? We don't have to try and do a 10% increase to be flat in our carryover. We can go down a little bit more, but we do need to change that trend from going down like this to level it off a little bit, and we've got another year of seeing where we're at. So for Hayes, right now Keith said you're about 1.61 in district assessment. If we raised it 5%, that would be an additional almost 81,000, so you'd go to about 1.69 in district assessment for the co-op. So questions, comments on that? Again, not asking you to act on anything, but I want to give you kind of a picture of historically what we've looked at and things that go into, thought that goes into that carryover amount. Last piece, I'm going to just quickly run through a little more complicated topic, and we can have this for additional conversation down the road, but I wanted to introduce to you. So we know that the benefits for paras has been a long-running topic, I think. You know, we did some great things in increasing the wage from last year to this year. We've done surveys with the paras, and they recognize that benefits, health insurance primarily, is a part of their compensation package, and they would like that. Here's what we run into. The district has currently 2 benefits classifications. You're either full-time or you're part-time, right? And the full-time benefit is 100% of a single and a heavily subsidized dependence plan, whether it's family or spouse or children. Part-time is still actually an ACA affordable plan, when you look at our HSA option, it still qualifies as a affordable plan. So that means people that are have access to our benefits aren't eligible for subsidies on the exchange. But it's considerably more expensive than the full-time plan. If we were to say move our paras to full-time, which is something that instructionally we would like to do. We've got paras working 5 3/4 hours a day. Instructional length of day is 6.9 hours. So if we were to say, you know what, we do need you there all day, it doesn't make sense that we have someone leaving at 1 and somebody else coming in to finish the rest of the day or some most of this overlap time. So let's say, yeah, we want you to go full-time. That would help us instructionally with kids. We can't do that because we have 2 benefits classes. We have full-time and part-time. If you go full-time, that'd be about $1 million in premium that we would have to pay because the para participation would go up in the health plan. So, how do we do it? If we were to do something to attempt to rectify that problem, you would have to create a third benefit group. And that benefit group, so you'd have full-time, you'd have part-time, and you'd have a separate group of special education para. Right? So if you're a co-op special ed para, you're not full-time, you're not part-time, this is your benefits offer. If we were going to do that, we'd have to investigate and create a benefits offering, so a health plan that was both legally qualified coverage and affordable under ACA, otherwise it would be subject to paying fines. And then we would have to decide on a defined contribution for that to make the plan affordable and be able to identify what we were going to spend. It would probably look a lot like what the part-time benefit is because it would have to be at least about $98 per month for a single plan, because that's what ACA says it has to be. That's the safe harbor for ACA. So we've investigated this and we've put some things in process. There's nothing that's going to happen this year, but I wanted to kind of get you up to speed. If we're going to address what we feel like is a need at the co-op to provide a targeted benefits package for special ed paras, it would require creating them as a separate group and then finding a way to address that with how much of what's the plan going to look like, and then what's the contribution going to look like. There is a catch. We do have 20 paras right now that have been around with us since before 2008, when ACA was passed. After 2008 is when we started hiring paras at 5 3/4 hours. So we've got 20 folks that are full-time, because we used to hire them full-time before ACA. So if we're to do this, then there would be winners and losers, right? So we'd have to figure out a way to address how do you move somebody out of, in essence, what's the full-time benefit where you're getting free or heavily subsidized if you're doing dependents on your plan, and what would that look like in a new group? So all of that to say, we will continue to investigate, but we recognize that the next major step probably, especially when it comes to non-certified staff, is how to address health insurance for the para group. Questions, comments on that? Again, there's a lot more conversation that needs to go into it, but I just want to kind of prime the pump of this is what it would take.
Thank you. But you're thinking the benefit route is the better option than, say, increasing pay? I mean, that we've done that already. You don't think it's a matter of we could just not do a benefit, but maybe just increase pay?
I think when it comes to desire of the non-classified group, they recognize, so the paras recognize that benefits are pay and more is better either way. And so I think in some ways it does address. The thing that it doesn't address is the fact that right now we're limited to 5 3/4 hours a day because they can't go full-time, right? And so adding more pay doesn't change kind of what the co-op needs or what teachers, administrators, and paras recognize that we need. I mean, to put it this way, we have a whole lot of part-time people stitching together and filling in to make the full-time positions that we need.
I see what you're saying. It's filling a need for us too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions for Chris? Thank you. Next item is the 2019-2020 board meeting calendar.
We were able to put together a calendar that, that mirrors this year pretty closely. Really like for the board members to look at those dates and share with us over the next 3 weeks if you see any problems with that, and be able to act on it at the next board meeting. But we didn't really try to be creative and go any other way than just looking at what we had this year and try to make it look very similar to it.
Anybody have any questions on that? Next is discussion by board members and agenda requests.
Just maybe one thing. Keith, this is probably more directed to you. Is that I've heard a lot tonight about potential increases, whether it's textbooks that we need to make a commitment to, looking ahead to some other things. Do you kind of outline all those requests that are coming to us to consider as we look towards the budget year? Because I know we can't honor all of those, or can't honor them all at the level that may be requested, but it'd be good to know to sort that out, to balance that against what we are getting increasing. And I know whatever we may be suggesting for staffing needs as well. I just kind of would like a roadmap to help as we move forward, as we get closer to deciding on a budget and voting on one.
Sarah, I have a request to echo what Sophia said earlier, for us to have like a nice copy of the chart Rusty did to reference during the meeting, just always here at our stations. That would be great. And then I really love you guys' updates, and I feel really bad when they happen after 9 o'clock because my brain is mushy at that point. So on nights that we have a full agenda, if we could do the updates on nights that we don't have full agenda so you guys get our full attention, that would be a request I have.
I don't know if this is specifically, I don't know what kind of request this is, but, so tonight we've heard a lot about needs. We have needs in curriculum, we have needs in budgetary shift, we have needs maybe to move things around, and we heard some positive that there could potentially be some increased income for the next year and maybe even for a 5-year plan. I guess what I'm looking at is the question that's going to come back to us is always going to be, well, where should we spend that money? And I don't know if I'm tasking maybe you, John, you with this, but I'm hoping for maybe a recommendation in May or June that kind of shows, okay, this is the money we're looking to come in. This is the areas we'd like to focus on, or something else. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Would the rest of the board find that helpful?
Actually, that is planned. That has to exist. Yeah, we've got to be able to provide that.
Because I know sometimes it just seems like we have money coming in, and it seems like the conversation we have had before, where is it being spent and where's it going? And I'd just like to see, see where we're spending each part of the pie.
The difference with the recommendations this time is trying to look at it instead of just trying to take care of ourselves for the 1 year, really looking at it, trying to look at what we should have over the next few years and put that in perspective. Makes it a little bit, I don't want to say more complicated, but just makes it a little bit more, we have an opportunity at this time to really correct some, there may be individuals that think that our budget is solid. Our budget is solid if you compare to a number of years back, but there's different pieces of it that you've got to look at and say that it's not. Contingency, when you have contingency amount of money that's similar to some districts that are 2A or 3A, and we are a 5A school district and have the same amount of contingency money. Or you're looking, there's a variety of examples in that regard. And if the opportunity is there where money is available over the next 5 years, then we need to be pulling that down, identifying how much that is, and working over several years here to not just try to fairly tend to wages and salaries, but also try to really tend to some of these other things that have been put to the side, and understandably so, but really have been put to the side for quite a while. Yeah.
I wanted to thank administration, specifically Keith, Shanna, Chris, and John. I thought your guys' reports were phenomenal tonight. I was very, very happy to hear the information we did. Now, not all of it's good, but I just think, we talked about this a year ago about having these. I do have a couple of small criticisms. One, I hope we continue this, but I hope it comes earlier in the year, because it just seems that this type of information is step one to the planning process of setting next year's budget. And, before we start buying computers and things like that, because I think when we start looking at those numbers and the things you guys have raised tonight, it makes it a lot easier to say, well, wait a second, maybe we can deal with less in this area. And so it is, to me, it's, I guess, confirmation that some of us are on the right path and looking at this and not misinformed, so.
Anything else? Do we need executive session tonight?
We do not.
Amen. All right. Nothing else? Meeting adjourned.
What?